Chicago, April 22nd, 1931. 11:38 p.m. The air outside the Lexington Hotel tasted like gasoline and wet steel. A light rain tapped the sidewalk. Cars idled in a tight line like a funeral procession that didn't know who it was burying yet. Inside, a private dining room glowed amber under cigar smoke. Thick curtains, crystal glasses. White linen was so clean it looked insulting. And at the head of the table sat Al Capone. Broad shoulders, diamond ring flashing every time he lifted his drink. He was laughing loud enough to own the room. Across from him stood Bumpy Johnson, 26 years old, sharp-eyed, still wearing his Harlem suit like armor. He wasn't smiling, not even pretending. This meeting wasn't social. It was business. Capone had been squeezing black bookmaking roots that fed money back to Harlem. His men had taxed a few couriers too heavily. One was sent home without his watch and without 2 teeth. Bumpy came to Chicago for one reason: tell Capone to stop touching Harlem money. He'd done it politely at first. He'd even started with respect. But Capone didn't respect requests. He respected fear. Capone leaned back in his chair like he was watching a stage play. Then he looked Bumpy up and down, slow, like he was deciding whether Bumpy was a man or a message. And then Capone said it, clear enough that even the quietest man in the room heard it. That word, that ugly, poisonous word. The room froze so hard it felt like the heat went out. Forks stopped. A glass paused midair. Capone's Italians, 12 of them, stared at Bumpy like they expected him to break. Capone smiled wider, enjoying it. "Harlem sent you?" Capone said, in voice thick with contempt. "They couldn't send somebody cleaner?" Bumpy didn't move, but his jaw tightened. Because this wasn't just an insult. This was Capone planting a flag. A message to Harlem: you don't get to negotiate with me. You don't even get to stand in the same room as me. Bumpy spoke, calm as ice. "Say it again," he said. Capone laughed. The kind of laugh that invited violence. He stood up slowly, chair scraping the floor, and stepped closer until only a table corner separated them. He said the word again, louder, meaner. And as he said it, he reached out and patted Bumpy's cheek. Not hard, not violent. Worse than violent. A grown man humiliating another grown man in front of witnesses. For half a second, Bumpy's hands stayed at his sides. Because in that half second, he understood something terrifying. If he reacted, he would die in this room. 12 Italians, close range, guns under jackets, no exit. But if he didn't react, he would go back to Harlem carrying shame like a disease, and every man in Harlem who ever feared Capone would feel justified. Capone leaned in, breath hot with whiskey. "You're not in Harlem now," Capone whispered. "You're in my city." Bumpy stared back at him. Then he did something nobody expected. He smiled, small, controlled, and stepped backward. Not surrender, not fear, a promise. Bumpy picked up his hat from the chair and spoke like he was reading a death sentence. "You just bought 12 graves," he said softly. "In your own backyard." Capone's smile twitched. The room erupted in laughter again. Italian laughter. Dismissive laughter. Bumpy turned and walked out without running. But the moment he reached the hallway, his face changed. His bodyguard, a Harlem man named Leon Little Lennox Carter, caught up fast, eyes wide. "Bump," Leon whispered urgently. "We gotta leave. Right now." Because down the hall, near the service stairs, 2 Capone gunmen were already moving. Not to escort them, to erase them, Bumpy didn't speed up. He didn't look back. He only said one sentence quiet enough that only Leon heard. "Tonight, we survive." And as they hit the lobby, the first gunshot cracked upstairs like thunder. Chicago, April 22nd, 1931. 9:43 p.m. The first bullet didn't hit Bumpy. It hit the marble. It sparked white stone into dust and sent hotel guests screaming into the lobby like a flood escaping fire. Leon Little Lennox, Carter, grabbed Bumpy's elbow and yanked him toward the revolving doors. Leon wasn't tall, but he was built tight. Shoulders like a dock worker. Hands that shook only after the danger passed. Right now his hands were steady. Outside, rain slicked the street under the hotel lights. 2 black sedans sat at the curb. Drivers inside, engines already running. Leon didn't ask questions. He already knew the answer. "This was a setup," he hissed. Bumpy didn't respond. He was watching the upstairs windows, counting shadows, tracking movement, because Bumpy had made men angry before. But this was personal. They cut behind a delivery truck and moved fast down the side street. A second shot cracked, closer this time. Glass shattered somewhere above them. Leon shoved Bumpy into the alley mouth and they ran, shoes splashing through puddles that smelled like old beer and garbage. And that's when Leon finally said what he'd been holding back since Harlem. "Bump, you know who's going to pay for this?" Bumpy kept running. Leon swallowed hard. "Not you, not me. It's going to be my family." That was the part nobody in Harlem saw when they looked at Leon Carter. They saw the tough man, the loyal soldier, the guy who walked next to Bumpy like a shadow. But Leon had something Bumpy didn't. Leon had a wife who waited up, and a son who didn't understand why his father always smelled like smoke. Mary Carter was 24 and exhausted from being brave. She lived in a small Harlem apartment above a tailor shop. She never complained about money because complaining didn't change the rent. But she worried about one thing every time Leon left the house. That one day he wouldn't come back, and their son would be old enough to remember. Their son was Isaiah, 6 years old, and Isaiah had asthma. Not the catch your breath and shake it off kind. The kind where a child wakes up at night, choking like the air turned to water. The kind that forced Mary to keep a jar of rub on the nightstand and a doctor's note in her purse, like a charm against death. The medicine cost money they didn't have. The landlord didn't care. And Harlem didn't offer mercy, only work. Leon had been trying to save enough to move them out of the building because the cold air that slid through the broken window frames made Isaiah wheeze until his lips turned pale. But Leon's loyalty to Bumpy paid in cash, not safety. And cash always came with a receipt. Tonight, as Leon and Bumpy sprinted through the alley, Leon's mind wasn't on Capone's men. It was on Mary. Because Capone didn't just kill you. Capone punished you through the people you loved. They reached the end of the alley and stopped at a narrow street that opened toward the river. A freight train screamed in the distance like a warning siren. Bumpy pressed himself against the brick wall and finally looked at Leon. Leon's eyes were wet but angry. "I shouldn't even be here," Leon snapped. "I told you before we left Harlem, Capone don't do meetings, he do funerals." Bumpy's voice stayed calm. "And yet you came." Leon laughed bitterly. "Yeah, I came because I owe you. Because when I was starving, you fed me. When I was hunted, you hid me. So I came." He leaned closer, rain dripping from his brow. "But don't you dare act like I don't know what this is." Bumpy's gaze sharpened. Say it. Leon's voice lowered to a whisper. That word he called you, that wasn't for you alone. That was to make sure the whole country knows what he thinks we are. Leon's throat tightened. And if we walk away from this, Harlem gonna feel it. Every kid on Lenox Avenue gonna feel it. Bumpy stared at him, then slowly nodded. The moral choice was already forming like a blade. Walk away and keep families alive, or answer the insult and invite war. Leon dragged a hand down his face. I got a boy, Bump. I got a sick boy. His voice cracked on the last word. If Capone comes back at us, he ain't coming for me first. He coming for Mary. He coming for Isaiah. Bumpy didn't flinch. He didn't deny it. He only said something that made Leon's blood run cold. Then we can't miss, Bumpy said. Leon blinked. What? Bumpy stepped out, just enough to look down the street. Capone thinks he owns the board, that he can slap a man and end the story. Bumpy's eyes narrowed. But the story ain't finished. Leon's mouth went dry. Because in that moment he realized Bumpy wasn't thinking about revenge the way men in bars talked about revenge. Bumpy was thinking about strategy, and strategy meant someone would be used as bait. Leon swallowed, rain mixing with sweat. Bump, he warned quietly. Don't do it. Bumpy finally looked him dead in the eyes. I didn't come to Chicago to die, Bumpy said. I came to learn where he bleeds. And across the street, half hidden behind a parked car, Leon noticed a figure watching them. A man in a flat cap. Not a Capone soldier. Someone else. Someone who looked nervous. The man raised one hand slightly, like a signal. And then he mouthed two words that froze Leon in place. Harlem sent me. Leon's heart slammed. Because if Harlem sent someone, that meant Harlem already knew what happened. Which meant this wasn't just about surviving Chicago. It was about what Harlem demanded next. And the man in the flat cap whispered the name that turned the night darker. Capone's accountant is ready to talk. Leon stared at Bumpy. Bumpy didn't smile. He only asked one question, the kind that starts wars. Chicago, April 22nd, 1931, 11:57 p.m. The man in the flat cap introduced himself as Calvin Ross, Harlem-born, South Side hardened, eyes always scanning like he expected death to step out of any doorway. He wasn't a gangster. Not really. He was a runner, a connector. The kind of man who carried messages for powerful people and lived long only by never knowing too much. Calvin led them through a back street lined with shuttered butcher shops and dark storefronts. The rain had slowed to a spit, but the wind cut sharper, forcing the smell of the river up into the alleys. Leon kept looking over his shoulder. Bumpy kept looking ahead. Talk, Bumpy ordered. Calvin nodded, breath fogging. Harlem got word fast. Capone's boy's been bragging since you left that room. Said they put you in your place. Said you ran. Leon lunged forward, grabbing Calvin by the coat. Who said that? Calvin lifted both hands, terrified. I don't pick the talk, man. I carry it. Bumpy reached out and pulled Leon back. Not gentle, commanding. Keep going, Bumpy said. Calvin swallowed. We got a friend here. Works books for Capone. Numbers man, not a killer, not a soldier, just paper. He hesitated. Name's Domenico Nico Vitale. Leon stiffened. Italian. Bumpy didn't blink. Go on. Calvin slowed near an intersection, lowering his voice. Vitale's scared. Capone don't just keep money, he keeps secrets. Vitale's been skimming, small. Not enough to notice, but enough to feed a wife and kid. Calvin glanced at Leon. Capone found out last week. Leon's stomach clenched. What did Capone do? Leon asked, already knowing he wouldn't like the answer. Calvin's mouth tightened. He didn't kill Nico. He looked away. He killed Nico's brother instead. Made Nico watch. The silence dropped so heavy it felt like a weight on their chests. Bumpy finally spoke. So Nico wants out. Calvin shook his head quickly. Nico wants heir. Wants his kid to grow up with a father. But Capone's got him trapped. Nico said if he ever tries to run, Capone will take his daughter and sell her to men who don't ask names. Those were his words. Leon's hands curled into fists. This was the human cost nobody toasted to in those cigar rooms. This was what Capone's empire ran on, not just blood, but terror in the shape of family. Calvin pointed toward a row of warehouse buildings. He's holed up near the docks. Capone got him working late, counting cash shipments. Vitale says he'll talk to you, but only if he knows his family can disappear first. Leon whispered, "That's a trap." Bumpy nodded once. Everything is a trap. The question is who gets caught. They moved closer to the docks. The air got colder, wetter, full of fish rot and oil. A ship horn moaned somewhere out on the black water, low and lonely like grief. Then Leon stopped. His breath hitched because he saw it. A payphone on the corner ringing once, twice, nobody around it. Leon stared like it was a snake. "Bump," he murmured. "That phone ain't ringing for nothing." Bumpy didn't answer immediately. He looked at Calvin. Calvin looked away fast. That was all Leon needed. Leon shoved Calvin against the wall. "You set us up? Tell me right now." Calvin panicked. No, I swear. That ain't me." Bumpy stepped in, voice sharp as broken glass. "Leon, let him go." Leon hesitated, jaw clenched so hard it trembled. Bumpy walked to the phone slowly. Too calm. The ringing stopped. Then it rang again, insisting. Bumpy lifted the receiver. He listened, and his face hardened into something colder than anger. He didn't speak for several seconds. Then he said quietly, "Understood." He hung up. Leon's throat was dry. "Who was that?" Bumpy looked at him. "Capone?" Calvin gasped. Leon's blood went ice. Bumpy continued as if reading weather. "He says he's impressed. Says I got nerve coming out alive." Leon barked a laugh with no humor. "He callin' to congratulate you?" Bumpy's eyes lifted to the dark line of rooftops. "No," he said. "He callin' to negotiate." Calvin whispered, "That's impossible." Bumpy's voice stayed flat. "Capone don't negotiate. He performs. This is a performance." Leon felt his pulse in his ears. What did he want? Bumpy stared straight ahead, and when he spoke, Leon realized this wasn't just about pride anymore. This was about survival. "He wants me to leave Chicago by sunrise," Bumpy said. No more talk about bookmaking routes, no more complaints, no more Harlem money. Leon exhaled shakily. "And if we don't?" Bumpy's eyes sharpened with lethal clarity. "Then he says he's sending a gift to Harlem," Bumpy answered. "A message delivered to my people, so they remember what city rules the country." Leon swallowed. "What kind of gift?" Bumpy didn't respond at first. Then he said it. "Leon, he has your wife's address." Leon's legs went weak. He grabbed the wall to steady himself. Bumpy kept going. "Merciless, because truth is merciless." "And he knows your boy's name," Bumpy said. "Isaiah." Leon's mouth opened, but no sound came out. His son wasn't just a kid anymore. He was leverage. Leon turned on Calvin with murder in his eyes. Calvin pleaded, voice cracking. "I ain't tell him. I ain't tell nobody." Capone got eyes everywhere. Leon stepped toward Bumpy, trembling with rage and terror. "This is what I told you," Leon whispered. "This is what I warned you about." Bumpy didn't look away. "Now you choose," Bumpy said. Leon's face twisted. "Choose what?" Bumpy pointed toward the docks. "If we run, Capone wins and your family lives, for now. If we stay, we might get Vitale and hit Capone where it hurts." He paused. "But if we stay, Capone might still send men to Harlem anyway." Leon's eyes filled, not with weakness, with the awful pressure of impossible choices. "Either way," Leon whispered, "my boy could die." Bumpy stepped closer. "Listen to me," Bumpy said, voice low. "We don't get to pick safe, we only get to pick right." Leon stared at him, desperate. "What's right?" Bumpy answered with a sentence that felt like a trigger being pulled. "Right is making sure Capone never touches your family again," Bumpy said. Leon's breath shook. And then, down the dock road, headlights appeared. 2 cars rolling slow, hunting. Calvin whispered, "That's them." Leon looked at Bumpy, fear and loyalty colliding in his chest. Bumpy stared into the approaching lights and spoke like a man stepping onto a battlefield. "Now we find Vitale," he said, "or we die trying." And Leon realized the next hour would decide 2 futures, one in Harlem and one in Chicago. But as the cars drew closer, a new sound cut through the night, a child's scream, from inside the nearest warehouse. Leon froze, because the scream sounded small, too small. And Bumpy whispered the words that turned Leon's blood to fire. "Capone brought a kid here, to make somebody talk." Chicago, April 23rd, 1931, 12:11 a.m. The scream came again, thin, raw, terrified. Leon's body moved before his mind did. He started forward. Bumpy caught him by the shoulder and yanked him back hard enough to hurt. "No," Bumpy snapped. "Not like that." Leon glared. "That's a child." "That's bait," Bumpy said, eyes locked on the warehouse. "And you running in blind is exactly what they want." Calvin Ross stood a step behind them, shaking. Vitale said Capone was keeping his family close, like insurance. Bumpy's gaze narrowed. "Then we're not just rescuing a man. We're rescuing a family." The 2 cars rolled closer on the dock road, slow, confident. Headlights sweeping side to side like searchlights. Capone's men didn't look rushed. They looked like hunters who already knew the deer was cornered. Bumpy leaned into Leon, fast, low. "You got a gun?" Leon patted his coat, revolver loaded. Bumpy looked at Calvin. "You." Calvin shook his head wildly. "I don't shoot, I run." "Then you run," Bumpy said. "Straight behind those stacks. If things go bad, you disappear and get word back to Harlem." Calvin hesitated. "Bumpy, Bumpy cut him off. "You asked to help. Help by staying alive." Calvin vanished into the shadows. Now it was just Bumpy and Leon, pressed against cold crates near the corner of the warehouse building. A chain-link fence rattled gently in the wind. Somewhere nearby, water slapped against metal pylons like impatient hands. Leon's breathing was too loud. He tried to slow it and failed. Bumpy peered through a broken window. Inside, dim light, a desk, cash ledgers stacked high, 2 Capone soldiers smoking, and near the back, a small figure on the floor, a little girl, mouth taped, hands tied, Leon's stomach twisted. Oh, God. The girl's eyes were wide, wet, pleading. She couldn't be older than 8. Bumpy's face didn't change, but something in him tightened, like a lock clicking shut. Leon whispered, "We gotta go in." Bumpy shook his head slowly. "Not yet." Leon's voice cracked. "Not yet? Bumpy, Bumpy grabbed Leon's collar and pulled him close enough that Leon could smell rain and gun oil on him. "If you go in, they shoot her first," Bumpy hissed. "Then they shoot you. Then Capone wins twice." Leon's eyes burned with rage. "So what's the plan?" Bumpy stared through the window again, calculating. Then he noticed a third shadow near the desk, hunched over papers, hands trembling, face pale. Domenico Nico, Vitale. He looked like a man being crushed while still standing. His hair was slicked back but messy, his shirt wrinkled. His eyes kept darting to the child, like his soul was chained to her. Vitale wasn't just afraid. He was breaking. One of the soldiers slapped him, shoved a ledger at his chest. "Count it again," the soldier barked. "Capone wants perfect numbers." Vitale's lips moved silently as he added columns like prayer. His hands shook. Leon whispered, "That's him." Bumpy nodded once. Then he spoke, calm and terrifying. "We're going to make them move." He reached into his coat and pulled out a small object Leon hadn't seen before, a matchbook. Leon frowned. "What is that?" Bumpy held it up. On the cover was a logo from a Chicago nightclub, one Capone loved. He tore it open, shook out 2 matches, and slid them into Leon's palm. Leon stared. "You want me to light something?" Bumpy nodded toward the 2 cars creeping closer outside the warehouse. "One car," Bumpy said, "then the other." Leon's eyes widened. "That'll start a war right now." Bumpy's voice didn't waver. "No, it'll start confusion." Leon swallowed hard. "And if it doesn't?" Bumpy leaned close. "Then we die loud." Leon hesitated, thinking of Mary, Isaiah. But then he looked at the child inside, helpless, and he understood the moral choice wasn't a speech. It was a moment. Leon nodded once. He moved like smoke, circling behind stacked barrels until he was close enough to the first car. He crouched low, struck a match, and slid it under the rear tire where oil dripped onto the wet ground. The flame caught fast, greedy. Leon didn't wait. He sprinted to the second car, struck another match, and did the same. The fire didn't roar at first. It whispered. Then it grew teeth. A soldier leaned out of the first car window, confused. "What the—" The flames climbed the wheel well like orange snakes. The soldier shouted. Doors flew open. Men jumped out, swearing, slapping at the fire, yelling for water. And inside the warehouse, the 2 guards turned their heads. Bumpy didn't waste the moment. He kicked the side door in. The sound exploded through the building like a gunshot. He stormed in with Leon right behind him, both guns drawn. One guard reached for his pistol. Bumpy fired first. Bang! The bullet slammed into the guard's shoulder and spun him into the desk. Leon fired at the second guard. Bang! The man collapsed with a scream. Vitale stood frozen, eyes huge, unable to understand salvation when it finally arrived. Bumpy moved fast to the little girl, ripped tape from her mouth. She sobbed, choking on air. "It's okay," Leon said quickly, cutting her ropes with a pocket knife. "It's okay." Vitale's voice broke. "Sophia?" Leon blinked. "That's your daughter?" Vitale nodded violently, tears spilling. "And please, please don't leave her." Bumpy grabbed Vitale by the collar and shook him once, hard. "You want her alive?" Bumpy snarled. "Then you walk." Vitale nodded, shaking. But before they could move, a slow clap echoed from deeper inside the warehouse. 3, 4 claps, mocking. Bumpy turned toward the sound. From the shadows stepped a man in a fine coat, hat tilted, holding a cigar like it was a microphone. He wasn't one of the guards. He wasn't a dock thug. He looked polished. He smiled like a predator. "Mr. Johnson," the man said warmly, "Capone asked me to give you his regards." Leon's blood chilled. Bumpy's gun stayed level. "Who are you?" The man bowed slightly. "Rocco Bellini, Capone's courier." Vitale's face drained. "No," Vitale whispered. Bumpy's eyes flicked to Vitale. "You know him." Vitale couldn't speak. His mouth opened and closed like he was drowning. Rocco smiled wider. "Oh, Nico," Rocco sighed, almost fond. "I told you. Secrets don't leave this family." Leon's hand tightened on his revolver. Bumpy stepped forward, voice like steel. "Move aside." Rocco didn't. Instead, he reached into his coat slowly. Leon shifted, ready to shoot. But Rocco didn't pull a gun. He pulled an envelope. He tossed it onto the desk. It slid across the wood and stopped in front of Bumpy like a challenge. "Capone wanted you to have that," Rocco said. "A gift." Bumpy didn't take his eyes off Rocco as he reached for the envelope. He opened it. Inside was a photograph. Leon leaned in and his stomach dropped out. It was Mary Carter, standing outside the Harlem apartment building, and beside her, Isaiah. His small face turned toward the camera, unaware. Leon's breath stopped. Bumpy's eyes hardened but didn't widen, like he had expected this. Rocco watched Leon with amusement. "Cute boy," Rocco said softly. "Capone sends his love." Leon made a sound, half growl, half sob, and raised his gun at Rocco. Bumpy slammed Leon's wrist down. "Don't," Bumpy hissed. Leon trembled. "He has my son." Rocco chuckled. "Not yet, but we're close." Then Rocco's smile vanished. "Here's what happens now," he said calmly. "You put your guns down, you hand me Nico, you walk away. Bumpy Johnson goes back to Harlem with his pride bruised, and Leon Carter goes back to Harlem with his family intact." Leon's eyes were wild. "You lying?" Rocco shook his head slowly. "I'm professional." Vitale clutched Sophia tighter, sobbing silently. Bumpy stared at Rocco without blinking. "And if we don't?" Bumpy asked. Rocco's eyes went flat, dead. "Then Capone burns Harlem in pieces," Rocco said, starting with little Isaiah. Leon's knees almost buckled, and then came the moment that shattered everything. Vitale suddenly moved. Not toward Bumpy, not toward the exit. Vitale shoved Sophia into Leon's arms and stepped forward with both hands raised. "I'll go," Vitale choked out. "Just don't hurt my daughter." Leon shouted, "No!" Bumpy snapped, "Vitale, don't!" But Vitale looked at Bumpy with hopeless eyes. "You don't understand," Vitale whispered. "Capone doesn't forgive. Even if you kill Rocco, Capone will still come. And he'll come for her. And for him." His eyes flicked to Leon. "And for Harlem." Vitale swallowed hard. "I'm already dead," he said. "Let my daughter live." And Vitale walked to Rocco. Rocco smiled, satisfied. Bumpy's gun hand trembled for the first time. Because the twist wasn't a gunfire trick. It was worse. The one man who could destroy Capone chose to surrender. Rocco grabbed Vitale by the arm and turned toward the door. But as he did, Bumpy noticed something in Rocco's coat. A bulge. Not a gun. A radio, a transmitter. Bumpy's eyes narrowed. And he realized the truth too late. This wasn't a rescue scene. This was a recording. Capone wasn't trying to stop Bumpy from getting Vitale. Capone wanted to prove he could take Vitale back, to show Harlem that Capone could reach anywhere. Bumpy stepped forward, voice deadly quiet. "Leon," he whispered, "this whole thing was staged." Leon stared, broken. "Then what do we do?" Bumpy raised his gun again, eyes locked on Rocco's chest, and Rocco smiled like he'd already won. "Go ahead," Rocco said. "Shoot me." Bumpy's finger tightened, because if he killed Rocco, Isaiah might die. If he didn't, Harlem would bleed. And in that frozen second, Bumpy faced the hardest choice of his life. Pull the trigger, or let Capone take the advantage back home. Rocco leaned in, whispering like a devil. "So, Bumpy, which child matters more?" Chicago, April 23rd, 1931, 12:18 a.m. Bumpy's finger stayed on the trigger, but he didn't fire. Not because he was afraid, because he understood the math Capone was forcing him to do. One dead courier in Chicago for one dead child in Harlem. Rocco Bellini held Vitale by the arm like a trophy. Vitale didn't struggle. He looked relieved, like surrender was the only kind of control he still had. Leon stood behind Bumpy with Sophia clinging to his coat, small hands shaking. Leon's eyes were wet, furious and haunted. "Let him go," Leon choked. "Please, don't let him take him." Bumpy didn't answer. His gaze never left Rocco. Because the most dangerous thing in that room wasn't the gun or the hostage. It was the idea Capone wanted planted, that even when Bumpy fought, Bumpy still lost. Rocco backed toward the door, smiling. "Smart man," he said. "Tell Harlem what you saw tonight." Bumpy finally spoke. "You tell Capone something for me." Rocco paused. "Sure." Bumpy's voice dropped into something cold and personal. "You tell him he didn't just insult me." Rocco's smile thinned. Bumpy continued, controlled fury behind every syllable. "He insulted a whole line of men who've been swallowing that word since they were boys, and men get tired of swallowing." For the first time, Rocco looked slightly uneasy, like he had heard something real. Then the warehouse door creaked open behind him. 2 more Capone soldiers appeared, guns up, confirming what Bumpy already knew. Even if he killed Rocco, he wouldn't walk out with Vitale. Rocco jerked his chin at Leon. "Nice family you got, Carter," he said. "Capone's got good taste." Leon raised his gun, shaking so badly it rattled. Bumpy snapped, without turning. "Leon, no." Leon's voice broke. "He's gonna take my boy." Bumpy turned his head slightly, eyes sharp. "And if you shoot now, he'll take your boy and this girl," Bumpy said, "and he'll make you live long enough to know it." Leon's jaw clenched. His whole body trembled with the effort not to pull the trigger. Rocco laughed softly, satisfied, and dragged Vitale out into the night. Vitale looked back once, eyes full of apology. "I'm sorry," Vitale mouthed. Then he was gone. The warehouse felt suddenly empty, like hope had been removed from the air. Sophia clung to Leon's coat and whispered in Italian, "Papa." Leon didn't understand the word, but he understood the sound. He sank to a knee, holding the child gently like she was something fragile he didn't deserve to touch. Bumpy lowered his gun slowly. Outside, the burning cars crackled. Sirens wailed in the distance, and Leon finally snapped, turning on Bumpy with tears and rage. "You promised," Leon whispered. "You said we couldn't miss." Bumpy stared at the floor for a long second. Then he answered with the cruelest truth. "I didn't miss," Bumpy said. "Capone moved the target." Leon's voice rose. "So what now? We go home like dogs? We let him send gifts to Harlem?" Bumpy's expression hardened. "No," he said. He stepped forward and picked up Vitale's ledger from the desk. Still open, columns of numbers like veins. Bumpy flipped through it fast, eyes scanning. Leon frowned. "What is that?" Bumpy stopped on a page and tapped a line item. This is, Bumpy said quietly, Capone's bloodstream. Leon leaned in, saw coded payments, names, dock numbers, and 2 words that made his stomach twist. Police. Weakly. Bumpy looked at Leon, and in his eyes was a new plan, one darker than revenge. Capone thinks he bought fear, Bumpy said, so we're going to sell him panic. Leon swallowed. How? Bumpy closed the ledger. By making Chicago doubt its own king, he said, starting tonight. Leon looked down at Sophia, then back at Bumpy, and he realized what the real consequence was. They didn't rescue Vitale. They rescued proof, and proof could start a war bigger than bullets. Bumpy stepped toward the door, rain mist curling in. Leon, he said, get that girl somewhere safe. Leon hesitated. And you? Bumpy's voice was barely a whisper, sharp enough to cut. I'm going to make sure Capone learns something, Bumpy said. Leon asked the question that came from fear, not curiosity. What? Bumpy stared into the Chicago night. That words have a price, he said, and tonight, Capone made it expensive